What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. If you saw the last one, we got the small block EFI set up running, but we had some issues. We have coolant leaks and we have transmission leak. What we got going on right now is I got the coolant draining. I think instead of replacing those gaskets, it may be the bolts need to be sealed. I think the bolts on the intake manifold are drilled all the way through into the coolant passage, and it's possible it's leaking through the threads of those bolts and out in between the manifold and the gasket. And it looks like it's coming from the gasket, but it possibly could be coming from the manifold. So I'm draining the coolant. I'm gonna clean those threads, and we're gonna use some thread sealant on that. And then, like I said, one of the heater core fittings is leaking. It's already sealed up, but it's kind of tricky because it's a 90 and I have to have it positioned right, and it's not like super tight, and I don't think I have enough to go another turn. So I'm gonna try maybe some Teflon tape or something else to get that sealed up, and then we'll have to dig into the transmission. And then we got a bunch of stuff to do to get this thing to drive. We're gonna drive it in this video. So we got to bolt the entire body back down. We got to mount the radiator up. We got to build a battery box and just mount a few things up and kind of tidy up a few things, and then we can drive it. But the number one issue is we need to fix this coolant leak. So once this is done draining, we're going to clean those threads, like I said, and see if that will fix our leak. I'm really hoping that it's not the manifold gasket, because I really don't want to tear this manifold back off. Well, I'll show you the leaks. We got, I guess I kind of wiped it up, but right along here, there's the main coolant passage that crosses over, and I'm thinking it's coming from the threads up and out in between the gasket here. So what I'm going to do is seal, actually I might seal all these up. These inner ones go into the center of the engine where there's oil, and those can leak as well. So I might just seal all the bolts up, but we're gonna have to do them one at a time because we don't want to loosen that gasket up at all. So we'll pull one out, clean it all, seal it all, and retorque it. And then the main problem I'm having is that I got to figure out is this 90 here is leaking, and I can't tighten it anymore. It's already, you can see I already had to notch that out and the back of the water pump just to get it there. If I do one more turn, I'm not sure I can really cut that enough. So I'm gonna have to find some way to get some sealant to hold on this 90. So we'll pull that out, clean that, reseal that up with something, maybe some thread tape or something, I don't know, to get that to seal up. And then we'll throw it all back together and see if that fixes our leaks. All right, we got that fitting out. We're waiting for some new sealant. I'm checking these bolts, and these do go, these holes go all the way into the head, into the coolant passage. So I'm like 99% sure if we seal those up, that's gonna work, because when I pulled the bolt out, there was coolant on it. You can still see some of the coolant in the threads there. So I'm pretty dang sure that is our leak. So we'll seal those up and see if that'll work. Well, I bought some other thread sealant that I'm going to try on these intake manifold bolts. I'm still waiting for that, so once that shows up, we'll get on that. What I want to do now is get started on mounting the radiator and building a battery box. I've had a ton of questions and requests about how I go about making parts. I basically go from cardboard to CAD, and then from CAD I cut it out on my plasma table. So I'm gonna show you guys exactly how I build my parts. Like I said, I start with cardboard, I get it, as close as I can, and then I get it onto CAD, and then we'll get that on the plasma table, we'll cut it out, and usually it's pretty dang close. So here's my pieces for the bottom mount. This is basically gonna go and bolt onto these bolts here. These are gonna double as my bumper mounts, but it's gonna be just perfectly fine to double that up. So that's gonna go there. We're gonna have a piece coming up. We're gonna bend that, and then I'm just gonna make basically a U-strap, kind of like that, to go around the bottom of the radiator. I got some like 1/16 inch thick rubber that I'm gonna put inside there, so it's not rattling around metal to metal, but that's gonna kind of hold that like that. And then I'm gonna plate up here, basically enclose all that so it's kind of follows the contour of that radiator here. It is kind of angled down here, so we're going to follow that contour and kind of just close the end in. What I like to use to get the bolt holes in the right location is I just use paper, and then you can take your fingernail and kind of run it into the hole, and then you can see it, and then I just mark that out with a little pen, and then I'll measure all that and get that into CAD. All right, we got all this drawn up. That's the lower mount. That will bolt on to the frame like I said, and then that's the little strap. We'll bend that up at a 90 to kind of hold the radiator, and then that piece is going to close in the end, and then this is going to be the upper mount. So these two pieces here with the holes is going to weld to the bottom of this and bolt onto the radiator. This is going to sit on top of the radiator, and then I'll have a tube that runs here and then bends down to the core support. So this will act as a mount for the radiator, and it will complete that core support because it is cut for the radiator. And then I do have some holes in it. I'll probably throw some dimple dies in it, give it some strength and some looks. So that should work pretty good. Now there is a few different ways you can get all this into CAD. What I like to do is just measure. You can take a picture of your part, get it into CAD, and then trace over it. I don't find that as accurate as just measuring, so I just measure everything by hand, and then it's usually pretty close that way. So I'm gonna get all this cut out of I'll probably go 14 gauge on this. It doesn't need to be thick, and then with that upper mount with the holes in it, doing dimple dies actually strengthens that steel quite a bit. So 14 gauge is gonna be plenty for that. So we'll get all that cut, and then I do still have the file for the battery box I built for the FJ40. It's the same size battery, so I'm just gonna copy that box because it turned out really good. So I'm gonna copy that. I'm gonna cut that out. I think I did that at 1/8 inch. We'll cut that out, get that all bent up and welded together, and then we can get it mounted up to the truck. All right, instead of cutting all this stuff first, what I think I need to do is bend this tube, because I'm gonna run, I got 1-inch tube here, and we're gonna have to run it kind of right there, but you can see it's gonna hit the radiator cap. So what I need to do is kind of put a bend around that radiator cap and that little nipple there for the overflow. So I'm gonna bend this first and see where it lands and where it clears, and then I'll have to do my measuring for that top plate here. Well, I decided to scratch the tube idea. I couldn't get these two bends close enough to where I could still have a plate like right here on this edge that looks good. So I decided I'm just gonna do a plate top. So it's gonna be kind of like that, and then it's gonna bend up, bolt in there, and then I'll fill that little gap in there, and then weld on the mounts off the bottom here to bolt it to the radiator, and then we'll cut those lower mounts and we'll see how it all works out. I think it'll work this way. All right, after lots of measuring, I got the CAD file ready to go. So we'll get that ready. We'll throw on some 14 gauge on the plasma table, cut it out, and see how it looks. Well, we got our parts cut, but we just got our thread sealant in. I'm gonna try this high temp from Permatex. It's the 59214. So we'll get some on these bolts. Like I said, I think I'm just gonna seal all the intake bolts, because I think the back ones are actually okay, but these middle ones I know go into the oil galley in the middle of the engine. So let's seal these up, and we got this already sealed up right there. I just did thread tape for now. I think that'll work. If not, we'll throw some of that on it, but let's get this all sealed up. Well, we're all sealed up. Now these bolts were completely covered in coolant, so I'm pretty dang positive that's where the leak was coming from. So either way, we're good to go there. Let's jump on these mounts. I'm gonna start with the lower, kind of get that lower set where we want it. And then this is the upper piece. Turned out pretty sweet. I think it'll look good once we do our dimple dies in these holes. And then like I said, these are gonna weld on underneath, and we're gonna use those holes to bolt it to the radiator right there. So that should work pretty good. Well, that actually turned out better than I thought. I actually think it looks better than if I were to go tube. I don't know, I like it, especially with the dimple dies and then how I tied it in here. I still got to trim it. It's sticking out a little bit here. I'll just bevel that down a little bit, but we are good to go. These mounts, uppers and lowers, turned out perfect. And this upper really serves as 3 functions. It completes the core support, it's a radiator mount, and it looks good. So I'm stoked with it. Next, let's do battery box. So like I said, I already got the file on my computer for the battery box we built for the 40. Let's just copy that one. We'll bolt it right in. It should be pretty easy to get that set up. Well, battery box is good to go. That turned out really nice. Now, I was just gonna kind of bolt it to the top of this old battery bottom tray thing, but my OCD got the best of me. It's a little rusted out, so I'm just gonna cut that thing out of there. Just a few spot welds, it's pretty easy, and then we'll be much better off, I think, without all that rust in there, and we'll just bolt that straight through the inner fender there, and we'll be set. Well, battery box is in, bolted in nice and snug. That is gonna work so perfect. So I'm trying to get everything done that we need to powder coat. And one other thing I want to do is I want to extend this intake out to get my filter more in this inner fender. And I think that'll just keep it away from the heat for one. And for two, it'll look a lot better. So I got some more 4-inch straight. And hopefully we can get a decent weld on there. The rest of that welded pretty good, but I'm really not very good at welding aluminum. So we'll see how it goes, but I want to extend that out, and then we got to powder coat that intake pipe, the whole battery box. I think I'm gonna leave this and paint it the same color as the engine bay. That way it matches the whole core support, but these bottom mounts here can get powder coated black. And then I think there was a couple other things. Oh yeah, this bracket for the regulator needs to be powder coated, and maybe a couple other little things that we can powder coat. We'll do all that black and it'll look much better. Well, I don't know what's gotten into me, guys. I have struggled with aluminum every time I've ever welded in my life, and this one turned out, I mean, some of you probably don't think it looks that good, but I think it looks freaking amazing compared to what it usually looks like. It was effortless. It just, I don't know, it just welded. So we're good on intake there. Now I'm gonna jump on some powder coat. So like I said, battery box, that intake, regulator mount, radiator mounts, and a couple other little things we got to powder coat. Well, we're all done powder coating. These parts, like always, turned out really good. This is the stone black that I've been really using a lot lately from Prismatic Powders. If you guys want to check it out, head over to prismaticpowders.com. Like I said, the stone black, it's kind of a matte black color. I mean, it's a really nice color. It's honestly one of my favorite powders. That's why I keep using it. But either way, we're good to go there. Let's get all this stuff back installed on the truck, and then let's figure out what we got to do next to get this thing driving. I know the steering is all loose and disconnected. We got to do drive lines, which I have a set of new drive lines over there, and then we got to put the belts back on and get some of this stuff in the engine bay back buttoned up. And then we got differentials, front and rear, transfer case to fill up with fluid. One thing I do want to do to the rear is pull the overload leaf off of the 63-inch Chevys. It does have the overload in it still right there. That'll probably drop me about a 1/2 inch, and then I also do need to swap those U-bolts out because those are just some cheapos that were in there. I do have some nice new U-bolts right here that we need to throw in, so we got to throw the U-bolt in and we'll pull that overload at the same time, pull that out, and it should level this thing out a little bit. You can see the back is just a little bit higher than the front, so dropping that back down, I think it'll look a lot better. Well, overloads are out and our new U-bolts are in. That is all much better now. I haven't put it on the ground yet, but it should be. Those are about a 1/2 inch thick, or a little over a half, so it should level it out a little bit. It should look a little bit better, and we really don't need those overloads. Well, the next thing I want to work on is drive shafts for the truck. Now, since we moved the engine and transmission forward, we went about a 1/2 inch forward, which doesn't sound like much, but this rear drive shaft was already pretty short. You can see it was running about halfway up. We really should be running farther in, so we're gonna have to have the rear shaft lengthened. The front should be okay on length, but this cardan joint is completely shot. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna box these up and I'm gonna send them to Inland Empire Driveline, the same company that I had do the drive shafts on the FJ, and these things turned out perfect. They're amazing. So I'm just gonna send them off. I know they're gonna be done right. So we'll get those boxed up, sent out, and once we get them back, we'll check them out and throw them on the truck. Look at those puppies, those look brand new. So what I think he did actually on the rear shaft, there was a 3-inch tube before, now it's 3.5, so it should be a little bit stronger. And then obviously they're rebuilt with new joints, new double cardan up front, and then they're all balanced and ready to go. So let's bolt these things on, make sure they fit. I gave them all the measurements, so they should be dialed in. Let's go bolt them on and see how they look. Well, drive shafts are in, they're fitting so much better. Before with the old shaft and before I moved this engine forward, honestly it was too short. Like half of that slip yoke was out of the transmission, which honestly is not good. You want most of those splines engaged. So now it's much better, it should be a lot stronger. Anyway, let's drop this thing back down. I'm curious to see how it's gonna look without those overload leaves in. It should be a lot more level now. Well, now we're sitting right. Honestly, it lowered it more than I thought it would. It looks perfect right now. So it's kind of hard to tell with the lift in the way, but we are sitting actually really, really level. I like it. It looks much better without that back being so much higher than the front. We are ready to fire this thing up. One last thing I want to do. JB Custom Fabrication sent over a transmission shift knob. They saw the video, obviously, of me installing their transfer case shifter, and they got the OCD like me, and they wanted me to have a matching knob. So they sent over a custom knob, custom engraved with my logo on it, so that is really sweet, and it matches the transfer case shifter. So let's throw this knob on, then we're ready to fire up. So like I said, this thing needs to go through its self-learning process. Even in the manual it says to just basically set that base map, get your timing right, make sure all the major components are correct, and then you just got to drive it and it'll self-learn. Now like I said, I'm not sure exactly how dialed in that gets, but I know it's going to get better. So let's do that. Let's hope that we can get this thing to move. I know the transmission's good. Like I said, it's still leaking. We still got to figure out this stupid transmission leak, but that's not a huge deal. We can still drive it. So let's get this fired up. We got to bleed coolant again. Make sure that sealing those intake manifold bolts cured our coolant leak, and then if everything is good, we'll go drive it and see what it does. So we are good, other than I just spilled freaking coolant all over everything. My funnel fell off, it filled up almost to the top, and then it toppled over. I lost a bunch of coolant, it sprayed everywhere. So we got that cleaned up. We haven't had any coolant leaks yet, but last time it didn't leak at all until we put the cap on and the system built pressure. So I'll throw the cap on, start it up, and I'll get back to you guys. Now, one quick question. There's gotta be a better way to have a funnel in these radiators like this. I mean, it just fell off, and every single time I've ever bled a cooling system, I have this issue. I make a disaster of coolant in the shop. It's a pain in the butt. There's got to be a better way to have a funnel that doesn't fall off. Drop a comment. Let me know if you guys have a solution for me. I've been struggling with that forever, but either way, let's throw the cap on, let's build some pressure, and pray to the coolant gods that we don't have any leaks. Well, this side's a little suspect. It almost looks a little bit wet on that gasket. This side looks nice and dry, but our coolant plug right there on the head is leaking. So there's always something. Not a huge deal. I'll have to drain the coolant again. Probably next time we're in the cooling system. It's just barely dripping out of there. So we should be good enough to drive it. So IIC might need some more adjustment, but it's running okay. I just want to get out and get some hours on it, get some miles on it to make sure that it's not just going to self-tune itself, because I keep messing with it and it's just going one way and then I go back the other way and I'm just chasing it. And that's kind of what the manual says. You just got to put some miles on it before you start messing too much with it. So that's the game plan. We got to drive this thing. Well, right after I put the camera down, I came back and looked, and we definitely got some coolant leaking on this side still. So I'm not sure if it's coming out of the bolt or that gasket. We may be pulling this freaking manifold back off, but either way, I think I'm still gonna go drive it and just see what it does. I don't know, pretty disappointing. I really don't want to pull that off, but we gotta fix our leaks. But either way, let's go drive it and see what it does. All right guys, let's go for a quick rip. See how she's running. Whoa! We got rubbish, but we're moving. Seems to run a little better than before. Run around 7. Them fender flares are rubbing pretty good though. Might need to do a little more trimming on those. Figured they would rub. We're going though, not bad. Well, first drive was a success. The fender flares need more trimming, you can see. I already cracked that one, but I have good news for you. It looks like this, oh, it dried up already, but that bolt right there was leaking coolant. So I think it still may be those bolts. That sealant I used just didn't work. So we may have to try a different sealant. I'm gonna keep plugging away at those bolts. I'm still pretty certain it's these bolts that are leaking. So one good thing though, that coolant outlet on the water pump is not leaking. Other than that, I don't really see any other leaks. I tightened that fitting up there and it quit leaking. So I think we just may need to reseal these bolts again with something different. Well, I made the mistake of asking on Instagram what your favorite thread sealant is. I got like 98 different answers. This was kind of one of the common ones. It's a Loctite 592 thread sealant, high temperature, kind of the same thing that I already put on these bolts, but it seems to be not working. Maybe I didn't put enough. I don't know. I waited 24 hours like I said, but either way, we're gonna try this on the passenger side bolts. The driver's side doesn't seem to be leaking, so I'm gonna leave those alone. We're gonna try this and see if this will work. All right, those bolts are sealed up. I'm really hoping that that is gonna actually seal it. I know for a fact one of those bolts was leaking. It started leaking externally on top of the manifold, like I said, so I know that bolt was leaking. But either way, we're gonna wait 24 hours for that to dry up and cure up, and then we'll fill it up with coolant and try it again. Well, third time's the charm, right? Our intake bolts are sealed back up for a third time. Let's go try it out. Let's go drive it around. We only drove it for like 5 minutes last time, so I wanna drive it for a little bit more and see if this thing will tune itself in. Okay. I said don't touch. No touching.
Cheese. Are you gonna go for a ride with Daddy?
Yeah.
All right. We gotta make sure that. Well guys, I don't want to speak too soon. We're up to temperature. We've been at temp for probably 10 minutes and I don't see any leaks. My fan is running, just keep it cool, but I don't see any leaks on the intake manifold. So I think that sealant we used, like I said, third time's the charm. That last sealant seemed to do the trick, and I did put a little bit more on. Maybe I just wasn't putting enough on at first, but either way, we're running all right. I think we just need to drive it and put some miles on it and get this Terminator X kit kind of self-tuning itself. And I mean, it's running pretty good once it's up and running. The issue I'm having so far is what I've noticed is just it's kind of hard to start. It takes a long crank and you got to have your foot on the throttle or it will just kind of sputter and it won't really start. So I think that has a lot to do with the IAC, because that's acting a little bit funny. It'll open and close and it'll kind of just do some weird stuff. I think it's just trying to learn. But either way, we're up and running, we're driving, and I did trim those fender flares a little bit more so we're not rubbing anymore. We're on to something. This thing is turning out pretty sweet. Well, anyways, guys, I'm gonna wrap this one up here. We got some exciting stuff coming next. We got to jump on the interior again. Now, we already did seats and center console and a few other little things, but we need to figure out the instrument cluster, all the gauges. I want to go through and clean everything up, pull the carpet out, pressure wash that, just go through it and tidy up all the interior. And then I'm kind of stressed about the bodywork because it's going to take quite a bit of bodywork. I mean, the cab itself isn't bad, but the bed is just wavy all the way down. It's going to take quite a bit of work to straighten out, but either way, I'm excited for it, a little stressed out about it, but I think it's going to look so good with a nice fresh paint job. Anyways, guys, I'm going to get out of here. Hope you enjoyed it. Why don't you go smash that thumbs up button, comment, subscribe. We'll catch you in the next one.